The thing about betrayal is that it doesn't announce itself. It doesn't come with sirens or warnings. It creeps in quietly, worming its way into your life, until one day you wake up and realize that everything you thought was true was a lie. For years, I thought I had it all. I was 37, married to my college sweetheart, Emily, with a thriving career in architecture and a beautiful home in the suburbs. Emily was everything I had ever wanted. Smart, compassionate, and stunningly beautiful. She had this way of making everyone around her feel seen, her laughter like music that brightened even the darkest days. Ours was the kind of marriage people envied, the kind that inspired endless social media posts filled with smiling selfies and heartfelt captions. But as I would soon discover, even the most perfect illusion can hide the ugliest truths. It started with little things. Emily had always been attentive, quick to ask about my day or surprise me with my favorite takeout when work ran late. But over the past few months, she'd grown distant. Her phone became an extension of her hand, her screen lighting up with messages she always seemed in a hurry to respond to. Late-night calls that she'd dismiss with a wave of her hand, murmuring something about work as she stepped into another room. "Everything okay?" I asked one evening as she stood by the kitchen counter, scrolling through her phone with a faint smile on her lips. "HM? Oh, yeah," she said, locking her screen and tucking her phone into her pocket. "Just some stuff for the charity gala." The charity gala. It had become her passion project over the last year, consuming more and more of her time. She'd taken to spending evenings at planning meetings or attending sponsor dinners. I was proud of her dedication, but I couldn't ignore the nagging feeling in my gut that something wasn't right. The first real crack in the facade came on a rainy Thursday evening. Emily had told me she'd be working late at the gallery where the gala was being organized. Sophie, our 10-year-old daughter, was at a friend's house for a sleepover, leaving me with a rare quiet evening to myself. But as I sat in the living room, the rain drumming against the windows, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had been building for weeks. I decided to text Emily, asking if she wanted me to bring her dinner. Her reply came quickly, "That's sweet, but I already ate. I'll be home late. Love you." Something about her response felt off. Emily always loved when I surprised her, especially with food from her favorite bistro. But tonight, she seemed eager to keep me at arm's length. Unable to let it go, I decided to do something I'd never done before. I drove to the gallery. The rain was coming down in sheets as I pulled into the parking lot, squinting through the windshield. Emily's car wasn't there. I sat in the lot for a few minutes, the engine idling as my mind raced. Maybe she had parked somewhere else. Maybe I was being paranoid. Or maybe she wasn't at the gallery at all. I didn't sleep much that night. When Emily finally came home, her hair damp and her cheeks flushed, she kissed me on the forehead and mumbled something about the longest meeting ever before heading to bed. I stared at the ceiling, the knot in my stomach tightening. The next morning, as Emily showered, I did something I had never imagined myself doing. I picked up her phone. My hands trembled as I swiped to unlock it, guilt and fear battling for dominance. But the phone was locked with a password I didn't know, a detail that felt like a slap in the face. We had never kept secrets from each other. At least, I hadn't. Over the next few days, my suspicions grew. I started paying closer attention. How her eyes lit up when her phone buzzed, the way she laughed quietly at messages she didn't share with me, the vague excuses about running errands that kept her out for hours. I told myself I was imagining things, that I was letting my own insecurities get the better of me. But the doubt gnawed at me, refusing to let go. The turning point came on a Saturday afternoon. Emily had left the house in a rush, saying she had a meeting with a caterer for the gala. I decided to follow her. I kept a safe distance as she drove across town, my heart pounding with every turn. When she finally pulled into the lot of a boutique hotel, I parked down the street, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. I watched as she stepped out of the car, her movements hurried but graceful. She wasn't dressed for a meeting. Her fitted blouse and skirt looked more suited for a date than a professional appointment. I waited, my chest tight, as she disappeared into the hotel. 10 minutes passed, then 20. Finally, unable to sit still any longer, I stepped out of the car and made my way to the lobby. The front desk clerk barely glanced at me as I walked through the pristine lobby, my heart racing. I scanned the area, looking for any sign of Emily, but she was nowhere in sight. I hesitated for a moment before heading toward the elevators, my mind spinning with questions. When I reached the second floor, I stepped into the hallway, the plush carpet muffling my footsteps. The corridor was quiet, the air thick with the scent of expensive perfume. As I turned a corner, I heard it, the faint murmur of voices, a low, intimate laugh that I recognized immediately. Emily. The sound came from behind a partially closed door. My throat tightened as I approached, each step feeling heavier than the last. Through the crack in the door, I saw her. She was sitting on the edge of the bed, her shoes kicked off and her blouse slightly unbuttoned. Across from her sat a man I didn't recognize, dark-haired, sharp-dressed, his hand resting casually on her thigh. Their heads were close, their laughter low and conspiratorial, the kind that spoke of shared secrets and unspoken promises. And then it happened. He leaned in, his hand sliding up her leg, and kissed her. She didn't pull away. She didn't flinch. She kissed him back with an intensity that left no room for doubt. I stumbled back, my breath catching in my throat, my vision blurred with rage and disbelief as I turned and walked away, the walls of the hallway closing in around me. My perfect marriage, the life I had built with Emily, was crumbling before my eyes. I don't remember how I got home that evening. The drive was a blur of rain-slicked streets and deafening silence, my mind replaying the scene in the hotel room over and over again. Emily's laughter, the way she leaned into him, her lips meeting his without hesitation. It was seared into my memory, a wound that throbbed with every heartbeat. By the time I walked through the front door, I was drenched, my hair plastered to my forehead. I stood in the entryway, staring at the darkened house, unsure of what to do next. Part of me wanted to confront her immediately, to demand answers, but another part, the part still clinging to the remnants of the life we had built, hesitated. Once I crossed that line, there would be no going back. Sophie's laughter echoed faintly from upstairs, reminding me of the stakes. I couldn't let her see this side of us, the raw anger and betrayal bubbling beneath the surface. She deserved better than that. Emily came home an hour later, her heels clicking softly against the tile floor. "Hey," she called out, her voice light. "Sorry I'm late." The caterer had a million questions. "Stop." The word came out sharper than I intended, cutting her off mid-sentence. She froze, her hand still on her purse strap, her eyes narrowing. "What's wrong?" I stepped forward, my hands clenched at my sides. "Don't lie to me, Emily. Don't you dare." Her brow furrowed, confusion flickering across her face. "What are you talking about?" "I followed you today," I said, my voice trembling with barely restrained fury. "To the hotel?" Her face went pale, the color draining from her cheeks. For a moment, she didn't speak, her mouth opening and closing as if searching for the right words. "Liam, it's not what you think." "Don't," I snapped, cutting her off. "I saw you. I saw him. Don't insult me by pretending it wasn't exactly what it looked like." She stared at me, her eyes filling with tears. "Liam, please, let me explain." "Explain what?" I demanded, my voice rising. "Explain how you've been sneaking around behind my back, how you've been meeting him while I've been here, raising our daughter and holding this family together." Emily flinched at my words, her tears spilling over. "It wasn't supposed to happen," she said, her voice breaking. "I never meant to hurt you." I let out a bitter laugh, the sound hollow in the quiet room. "You didn't mean to hurt me? That's your excuse?" She reached for me, but I stepped back, the distance between us a chasm that felt impossible to cross. "I was lonely, Liam," she said, her voice trembling. "We've been so disconnected. It felt like we were just roommates." "Roommates?" I repeated, my voice laced with disbelief. "That's your justification for betraying me? For tearing apart our family?" Her sobs grew louder, her hands trembling as she clutched at her purse. "I didn't plan this," she said. "It just happened. I didn't know how to stop it." The weight of her words pressed down on me, suffocating in its intensity. I turned away, running a hand through my hair as I tried to collect my thoughts. Does he know about me? About Sophie? I asked, my voice low. Emily hesitated, the silence stretching unbearably. He knows I'm married, she admitted finally. But I never told him about Sophie. I would never bring her into this. Her words were like gasoline on a fire. You mean to tell me you've been sneaking around with this man, lying to him just as much as you've been lying to me? Emily didn't answer, her shoulders shaking as she cried. The sight of her tears, once something that would have brought out every protective instinct in me, now only fueled my anger. I felt like I was staring at a stranger, someone I didn't recognize. I want you out of this house, I said finally, my voice cold and unwavering. Emily's head snapped up, her eyes wide. Liam, please. I said, get out. I shouted, my voice echoing through the room. You think you can come home after everything you've done and pretend like nothing's wrong? Like we can just sweep this under the rug? Where am I supposed to go? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't care, I said. Go to your hotel. Go to him. I don't want to see you right now. Her face crumpled, but she didn't argue. She nodded slowly, turning toward the stairs. I'll pack a bag, she said quietly. I watched her go, my chest heaving as the reality of what had just happened began to sink in. The woman I had loved, the woman I had built a life with, was leaving, and I had told her to go. The next morning, the house felt eerily quiet. Sophie woke up, her usual chatter filling the kitchen as she sat at the counter, eating cereal. Where's Mom? She asked, her tone curious but unconcerned. She had to leave early for work, I said, forcing a smile. She'll be back soon. It wasn't a lie, not really. I didn't know when or if Emily would come back, but Sophie didn't need to know that. Not yet. As I drove her to school, her voice bubbled with excitement about an upcoming field trip. I nodded and responded where appropriate, but my mind was elsewhere, replaying the events of the night before. The anger, the betrayal, the overwhelming sense of loss. It all swirled inside me, threatening to consume me. Later that day, Emily texted me. Can we talk? Please. I want to make this right. I stared at the message for a long time, my thumb hovering over the screen. Part of me wanted to delete it, to block her number and cut her out of my life entirely. But another part, the part that still remembered the good times, the love we once shared, hesitated. We'll talk, but not now. I typed back, my chest tightening as I hit send. That evening, after Sophie had gone to bed, I sat alone in the living room, the silence pressing down on me. I didn't know what the future held, didn't know if our marriage could survive this. But one thing was certain, things would never be the same. As I stared out the window, watching the rain streak down the glass, I made a vow to myself. No matter what happened with Emily, no matter how this played out, I would protect Sophie from the fallout. She deserved better than this chaos, better than the mistakes her parents had made. And I would do everything in my power to give her that. The house felt different without Emily. It wasn't just the emptiness. It was the absence of her voice, her scent, the warmth she brought to every corner of our home. But even as I noticed those things, they were tainted by the memory of what she'd done, the betrayal that had shattered the foundation of our marriage. I tried to focus on Sophie. She was my constant, her bright energy pulling me out of my darker moments. But even she noticed the change. One evening, as I was tucking her into bed, she looked up at me with wide, curious eyes. Daddy, why hasn't Mommy been home for dinner? She asked. I hesitated, searching for the right words. Mommy's busy with work right now, I said finally. But she loves you very much. Sophie nodded, seemingly satisfied with my answer, but I could see the question lingering in her mind. It broke my heart to know that she would eventually realize the truth, that her perfect view of her mother would inevitably crack. The days blurred together. Emily texted me constantly, asking to talk, begging for a chance to explain, but I ignored her messages. Every time her name popped up on my phone, a fresh wave of anger surged through me. What was there to explain? I had seen it with my own eyes. I had felt the sharp sting of betrayal in the pit of my stomach. Still, her absence didn't bring me peace. The house, once a sanctuary, now felt like a battleground filled with reminders of what we had lost. The framed wedding photo in the hallway, the anniversary card tucked into a drawer in my office. Each one was a dagger, twisting deeper into the wound she had left behind. One evening, unable to sit in the silence any longer, I called my best friend, Jake. We hadn't talked in months, our busy lives pulling us in different directions, but as soon as he answered, I felt a flood of relief. Liam, long time, man. What's up? I hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to start. Emily cheated on me, I said finally, the words tumbling out in a rush. The line went quiet for a moment before Jake spoke again, his tone serious. Jesus, Liam, are you okay? I don't know, I admitted. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Do you want to talk about it? He asked. And so I did. I told him everything, the months of suspicion, the hotel, the confrontation. He listened without interrupting, his steady presence on the other end of the line a lifeline I didn't realize I needed. When I finished, he let out a long sigh. That's brutal, man. I can't imagine how you're dealing with this. I'm not, I said, laughing bitterly. I'm just surviving. You don't have to do it alone, Jake said. Whatever you need, I'm here. The conversation with Jake gave me the courage to take the next step. I couldn't keep ignoring Emily, couldn't keep running from the decisions that needed to be made. The next morning, I texted her, "Come by tonight. We need to talk." Her reply came almost instantly, "Thank you. I'll be there." The hours leading up to her arrival were excruciating. I paced the living room, rehearsing what I would say, trying to keep my emotions in check. By the time the doorbell rang, my nerves were frayed. Emily stood on the porch, her face pale and drawn. She looked as though she hadn't slept in days, her usual polish replaced by a raw vulnerability. "Hi," she said softly. "Come in," I said, stepping aside. We sat across from each other in the living room, the silence between us heavy and charged. For a moment, neither of us spoke, and then Emily broke the silence. "Liam, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness," she said, her voice trembling, "but I need you to know how sorry I am. I made a terrible mistake." "You didn't just make a mistake," I interrupted, my voice cold. "You made a choice. Over and over again, you chose him over me, over us." Her eyes filled with tears, and she nodded. "You're right. I did. And I hate myself for it." "Then why?" I demanded, my voice breaking. "Why would you do this to us? To Sophie?" She took a deep breath, her hands twisting nervously in her lap. "I felt invisible," she said. "We've been drifting apart for so long, and I didn't know how to fix it. When I met him, he made me feel seen." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I had always prided myself on being a good husband, a good father. But hearing her say those words made me question everything. Had I failed her? Had I failed us? "That doesn't excuse what you did," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I know," she said, tears streaming down her face. "And I don't expect you to forgive me, but I want to try to make this right. For Sophie. For us." Her plea hung in the air, the weight of it pressing down on me. Part of me wanted to believe her, to believe that we could somehow repair the damage. But another part of me, the part that had seen her in that hotel room, wasn't sure I could ever trust her again. "I need time," I said finally, my voice hollow. "I need time to figure out what I want." Emily nodded, her expression a mix of hope and despair. "I understand," she said, "and I'll wait, however long it takes." As she left, I felt a strange mixture of relief and sadness. The conversation hadn't given me closure, but it had given me something to hold on to, a glimmer of clarity in the chaos. That night, as I lay in bed, my mind raced with possibilities. Could I forgive her? Could I ever trust her again? And even if I could, would it be enough to rebuild what we had lost? I didn't have the answers, but for the first time since discovering the affair, I felt like I was starting to ask the right questions. In the weeks after Emily's visit, life felt like a balancing act. Each day was a delicate effort to maintain normalcy for Sophie while wrestling with the turmoil that churned beneath the surface. I'd become an expert at compartmentalizing, smiling through parent-teacher conferences and soccer practices while pushing thoughts of Emily and her affair into a locked box in the back of my mind. But the lock wasn't perfect. It couldn't stop the memories from slipping through in quiet moments. The sound of Emily's laughter echoing in my mind, the image of her in that hotel room with him. I felt like I was walking a tightrope, every step threatening to send me plummeting into the depths of anger and despair. Emily kept her distance, texting occasionally to check on Sophie or to reiterate how sorry she was. She didn't push, and I appreciated that. I wasn't ready to face her fully, not yet. I needed time to figure out what I wanted, what was best for Sophie, and what I could live with. One evening, as Sophie worked on a school project at the kitchen table, I found myself staring at the family photos on the wall. There we were, frozen in time. Emily and I on our wedding day, beaming with the naive joy of a couple who believed love could conquer anything. Sophie as a baby, her chubby hands reaching for the camera. The three of us at the beach, our laughter captured in a single perfect moment. Looking at those photos, I felt a pang of loss so sharp it took my breath away. The life we had built, the family we had created. It wasn't just a lie. It was something worth fighting for. But could I? Could I set aside my anger and my pain long enough to try? Jake's voice rang in my ears as I called him later that night. "You don't have to decide anything right now," he had said during our last conversation. "Just take it one day at a time." Easier said than done. I decided to meet with Dr. Harper again. Sitting in her office, surrounded by the calm neutrality of her space, I let the words pour out. "I don't know if I can forgive her," I admitted, "but I don't know if I can walk away either. Sophie deserves a family, and part of me I still care about her." "About Emily." Dr. Harper nodded, her expression thoughtful. "It's okay to feel conflicted, Liam. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and it doesn't mean excusing what happened. It means deciding what you're willing to carry forward and what you're ready to let go of." Her words settled heavily in my chest. What was I willing to carry forward? And was it enough to rebuild the life we had lost? The opportunity to answer that question came sooner than I expected. One Saturday afternoon, as I was cleaning the garage, Emily pulled into the driveway. I froze, watching her step out of the car, her expression tentative but determined. She held a small box in her hands. "I was going through some things," she said softly, holding the box out to me. "I thought you might want these." I hesitated before taking it. Inside were mementos from our life together. Old concert tickets, a postcard from our honeymoon, Sophie's first drawing of our family. I swallowed hard, the weight of the memories threatening to crush me. "Thank you," I said finally, my voice strained. Emily nodded, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "I miss us," she said quietly. "I miss what we had." Her words hit me like a wave, the longing in her voice stirring emotions I had tried to bury. "I miss it too," I admitted, "but I don't know if we can ever get it back." "We can try," she said, her voice trembling. "I'm willing to do whatever it takes, Liam. Therapy, counseling, anything. I'll prove to you that I'm worth trusting again." Her plea hung in the air, heavy with desperation and hope. I wanted to believe her, to believe that the woman I had loved was still there, beneath the mistakes and the lies. But could I? That night, as Sophie slept and the house fell silent, I stared at the box Emily had given me. Each item inside was a thread in the tapestry of our life together, a reminder of the love and laughter we had once shared. I thought about Sophie, about the kind of family I wanted her to grow up in. And I thought about Emily, about the woman who had broken my heart, but who also seemed genuinely remorseful. In the end, I realized that I didn't have all the answers. But I didn't need them, not yet. What I needed was a chance to explore the possibilities, to see if there was anything left worth salvaging. I called Emily the next morning. "Let's start with counseling," I said. "We'll take it one step at a time." Her relief was palpable, her voice trembling with emotion. "Thank you," she said. "I won't let you down, Liam. I promise." It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't a guarantee, but it was a beginning. In the weeks that followed, Emily and I started attending counseling sessions together. They were raw, painful, and unflinchingly honest. We talked about the affair, about the cracks in our marriage that had led us to this point, about the anger and hurt that still lingered between us. There were moments when I wanted to walk away, when the pain felt too heavy to bear. But there were also moments of connection, glimmers of the bond we had once shared. Sophie remained blissfully unaware of the storm raging beneath the surface. Her laughter and boundless energy were a balm to my wounded soul, a reminder of what was at stake. I didn't know if Emily and I could ever rebuild what we had lost, but for Sophie's sake, I was willing to try. One evening, as we sat on the couch after a particularly emotional counseling session, Emily reached for my hand. "Thank you," she said softly, "for giving us a chance." I looked at her, the woman who had hurt me more deeply than anyone else ever could, and felt a flicker of something I hadn't expected: hope. It wasn't a fire, not yet, but it was a spark. And maybe, just maybe, it was enough to light the way forward. Counseling became a new routine for Emily and me. Every Tuesday evening, we sat across from our therapist, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. Dr. Klein didn't pull punches. She asked hard questions, challenged our assumptions, and forced us to confront the uncomfortable truths we had avoided for so long. "Emily," Dr. Klein said during one session, her voice calm but firm, "what would you say was missing in your marriage that led you to the affair?" Emily hesitated, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She glanced at me, her eyes filled with guilt, before speaking. "I felt invisible," she admitted. "Liam is an amazing father and a wonderful provider, but somewhere along the way, I felt like we stopped being partners. I didn't know how to tell him, and when someone else showed me attention, I made the wrong choice." Her words stung, but they weren't new. She had said as much the night I confronted her, but hearing them here, in the sterile neutrality of the therapist's office, made them feel more real. "Liam," Dr. Klein continued, turning to me, "how do you feel about what Emily just said?" I took a deep breath, searching for the right words. "I feel angry," I said honestly, "because I've always tried to be there for her, to be the husband and father she needed. And hearing that it wasn't enough, it makes me feel like I failed." "You didn't fail," Emily said quickly, her voice breaking. "This wasn't your fault. It was mine. I should have talked to you instead of running away." Her sincerity softened the edge of my anger, but it didn't erase it. The wounds were still fresh, the betrayal still raw. Forgiveness, if it ever came, would take time. At home, things were tentative. Emily hadn't moved back in, but she came by frequently to spend time with Sophie. They played board games, baked cookies, and worked on school projects together. Watching them interact was bittersweet. Emily was a wonderful mother, and Sophie adored her. But I couldn't forget the secrets she had kept, the lies she had told. One evening, after Sophie had gone to bed, Emily lingered in the kitchen. She was making tea, her movements slow and deliberate, as though she were searching for an excuse to stay. "Do you want to sit?" I asked, surprising even myself. She looked at me, her expression cautious. "Sure." We settled on opposite ends of the couch, the silence between us both familiar and strange. "I'm trying," she said after a moment, her voice soft. "I know it's not enough, but I want you to know that I'm trying." "I know," I said, my tone neutral. "I see it." Her shoulders relaxed slightly, and for the first time in months, the tension between us felt a little less heavy. As the weeks turned into months, the counseling sessions became less about the affair and more about the underlying issues in our marriage. Dr. Klein helped us explore the cracks that had formed over the years, the missed connections, the unspoken resentments, the ways we had both contributed to the distance between us. "There's no going back to the way things were," Dr. Klein said during one session. "But that doesn't mean you can't build something new. The question is, do you both want to?" Emily nodded immediately, her resolve clear. I hesitated, the weight of the decision pressing down on me. Did I want to rebuild with her? Could I let go of the betrayal and trust her again? Or was it time to let go and move on? Sophie's presence continued to ground me. She had no idea what was happening between her parents, and I was determined to keep it that way. One afternoon, as we walked home from the park, she looked up at me with her big, curious eyes. "Daddy, do you still love Mommy?" she asked. The question caught me off guard, and I stumbled over my words. "Why do you ask that?" I said finally. She shrugged, her expression thoughtful. "I just want us to be happy." Her words stayed with me long after she had skipped off to play in the backyard. I did still love Emily in a way, but was love enough to overcome everything that had happened? One weekend, Emily invited Sophie and me to join her for a picnic at the park. It was the first time we had spent a day together as a family since the affair came to light. The weather was perfect, blue skies, a light breeze, and Sophie's laughter echoed through the air as she chased a kite across the grass. As we sat on the blanket, watching Sophie play, Emily turned to me. "Thank you for coming," she said quietly. "It means a lot to me." I nodded, unsure of how to respond. The day had been unexpectedly enjoyable, a glimpse of what we used to have. But it also reminded me of how far we still had to go. That night, as I sat alone in the living room, I thought about the future. Emily's remorse was genuine, her efforts to rebuild trust clear. But trust wasn't something that could be restored overnight. It would take time, patience, and a willingness to face the hard truths. I didn't have all the answers, but I knew one thing. I wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. The next morning, I called Emily. "I think it's time for you to come home," I said. Her breath hitched on the other end of the line. "Are you sure?" "No," I admitted, "but I'm willing to try." The decision to let Emily move back in wasn't an easy one, and it came with conditions. We continued counseling, both together and individually. We had open, honest conversations about our feelings, no matter how uncomfortable they were. And we set boundaries, clear, firm boundaries designed to rebuild trust. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments of doubt, still nights when I lay awake questioning whether I had made the right choice. But there were also moments of connection, shared laughter over dinner, quiet conversations on the porch, stolen glances that hinted at the love we were slowly rediscovering. For the first time in a long time, I felt a glimmer of hope. It wasn't a promise, but it was a start. The days following Emily's return to our home were a mix of progress and setbacks. Relearning how to live together after everything wasn't easy. Trust, once broken, doesn't mend overnight, and even the smallest actions could trigger waves of doubt. But amidst the uncertainty, there were glimmers of hope. Moments where the laughter came easier, where the weight of the past didn't feel so crushing. One of those moments came on a crisp autumn evening. Sophie was performing in her school's fall recital, her bright voice filling the gymnasium as Emily and I sat side by side in the audience. Watching our daughter beam with pride as the crowd applauded, I couldn't help but feel a swell of gratitude. Whatever else had happened, Sophie was the one thing we had done right. After the recital, Emily suggested we take Sophie out for ice cream. It was the kind of small, ordinary outing we hadn't done in months, and I agreed. Sitting at the brightly lit parlor, watching Sophie try to balance an oversized scoop on her cone, I caught Emily smiling at me from across the table. "What?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "Nothing," she said softly, her smile fading slightly. I'm glad we're here. Together." Her words hung in the air, and for the first time, I didn't feel the immediate sting of anger or betrayal. Instead, I nodded. Me too. It wasn't forgiveness, not entirely, but it was a step closer. Our counseling sessions continued to peel back the layers of our relationship, forcing us to confront truths we had avoided for years. I began to see my own role in the cracks that had formed between us, not as an excuse for Emily's choices, but as a way to understand how we had ended up here. I had buried myself in work, distracted myself with responsibilities, and let the intimacy we once shared slip through my fingers. Emily, too, owned her mistakes. She admitted that she had sought attention in the wrong places instead of addressing her feelings, that she had let her insecurities drive her towards something that ultimately brought more pain than satisfaction. "We both have to choose this," Dr. Klein said during one session. "Every single day. Rebuilding a marriage isn't about waiting for time to heal the wounds. It's about actively working to rebuild what you've lost." And so we chose. Day by day, moment by moment, we chose to fight for what we had built. But not every choice was clear-cut. One evening, as we sat together after putting Sophie to bed, Emily spoke quietly. "Liam, do you think you'll ever fully forgive me?" Her question caught me off guard, and I stared at her for a long moment. "I don't know," I said honestly. I think forgiveness is something that happens gradually. It's not a switch you flip, it's something you earn. She nodded, her expression thoughtful. I understand, and I'll keep earning it, every day. Her response, so simple and sincere, struck a chord in me. For the first time, I realized that forgiveness wasn't just for her. It was for me, too. Carrying the weight of anger and betrayal was exhausting, and slowly, I began to let it go. Months turned into a year, and the life we rebuilt together began to feel steady again. There were still moments of doubt, still echoes of the past that crept in when I least expected them. But there was also a renewed sense of partnership, a commitment to each other and to Sophie that felt stronger than it ever had before. One sunny afternoon, as we sat in the backyard watching Sophie play, Emily turned to me. "Do you think we're okay now?" she asked, her voice tentative. I looked at her, the woman who had once shattered my heart, and saw not just the mistakes but the growth, the effort, the love that had carried us through. "I think we're getting there," I said. "And that's enough for me." Epilogue. It's been 2 years since the affair came to light, and life looks different now. The scars of what happened are still there, faint reminders of a painful chapter we worked hard to close. But they don't define us anymore. Emily and I learned to communicate in ways we never had before, to prioritize each other even amidst the chaos of work and parenting. We're not perfect, but we're honest, and that honesty has become the foundation of the life we've rebuilt together. Most importantly, Sophie is happy. She still sees the world through the wide, hopeful eyes of a child who believes her parents are invincible. And maybe, in some ways, we are. Forgiveness isn't a destination, it's a journey. And for the first time in a long time, I'm okay with where we are.